Let's start reading ahead. Then, from one thing to another, M. Hamel went on to talk of the French language. So, after M. Hamel kept on saying one thing or another, he kept on talking about the French language. So, French language, saying that it was the most beautiful. M. Hamel was of the view that French language was the most beautiful language, and he was also of the opinion that it was the clearest and the most logical, that we must guard it among us and never forget it. Because when a people are enslaved, as long as they hold fast to their language, it is as if they had the key to their prison. Then he opened a grammar and read us a lesson. So now, according to M. Hamel, this French language was the most beautiful language in the world. It is the most clearest and the most logical, that they must guard that language. Now he stressed on guarding the language. How they can guard the language among us? By using it, by teaching each other, and never forget it. It is for the French language. And why he is stressing upon this particular thing, that they must guard the language? Because he says that when people are enslaved, when people are under some other country, when people are under some rulers, as long as they hold fast to their language, as long as they are with their language, they are using the language, they use the language, and it is as if it is the key to their prison. So this is a key to free them from that slavery, and it is a key to their freedom. Okay, after this, M. Hamel opened a grammar and read us our lesson. I was amazed to see how well I understood it. So friends was quite surprised that in that lesson he was able to understand each and every word that was spoken by the teacher, and he was surprised how he could learn that lesson of grammar without any fail, and he understood it properly. He said that I was amazed to see how well I understood. All he said seemed so easy. It was very easy. I think too that I had never listened so carefully, and that he had never explained everything with so much patience. Now he said that the reason can be either he has never listened so carefully before, or the teacher had never explained with such a patience earlier that he understood each and every point of that lesson. It seemed almost as if poor man wanted to give us all he knew before going away, and to put it all into our heads at one stroke. At one stroke stands for in one go. So Franz realized here that M. Hamel want to teach each and everything that he has in one. Matlab he is feeling that he is going away and he should give the most, the best he has. He should pass over those things to his students and people of Alsace. Pause the video and look at the notes based on the paragraph read. Try to write in your own words and say them aloud to improve your skills. Let's look at the next paragraph. After the grammar, we had a lesson in writing. That day, M. Hamel had new copies for us, written in beautiful round hand, France, Alsace, France, Alsace. They looked like little flags floating everywhere in the schoolroom, hung from the rod at the top of our desk. You ought to have seen how everyone set to work and how quiet it was. So he said that the next lesson was in writing, and he has brought some new notebooks for them where he had written in beautiful hand in calligraphy the name of the country and the name of that particular village and or province, that is Alsace in France, Alsace, France. And he said that it had decorated, it was so beautiful as if it had decorated the classroom. And the second thing was that it was total quiet. The atmosphere in the class was completely quiet and no sound could be heard. Only the sound could be heard was the scratching of the pens of the paper. Even one of some beetles flew in, but nobody paid any attention to them, not even the little ones. Fran said that in normal class, when a beetle or some wasp, etc., enters in the class, all the children start shouting, and that day nobody even noticed. Everyone was engrossed in his or her work, and they did not even notice the beetles that have entered in the class, and they were busy. Now even the little ones, the littlest ones who worked right on tracing their fish hooks, like who had not even just started the letters, who were practicing lines, they were also so quiet as if they were learning French too. On the roof, the pigeons cooed. Franz noticed that on the roof of the school, some pigeons cooed very low, although their volume was quite low. But Franz, as he was noticing different things in the class that day, and certain thoughts related to the language were haunting him. He was in a disturbed position, he was so disturbed, and he just heard the pigeons going, and he wondered, will they make them sing in German? Even the pigeons. He wondered, the human beings, the winners or the rulers can rule over the people, over the territory. Will they have any right to rule over nature? Can they rule over nature also? Can they make the pigeons coo in German? Can they make the pigeons coo in German? Like, can they impose some particular kind of restriction on the pigeons also? Can they have their right on the natural things like pigeons? Friends was really wondering that they have made us forcibly, they are making us forcibly learn German, whereas they are not letting them learn their own language. And how can they make the pigeons learn German? Now let's have a look at the notes based on the paragraph we have read just now. See them carefully and try to make summary out of the notes. Let's move further and look how the story turns in the next paragraph. Whenever I looked up from my writing, I saw M. Hamel sitting motionless in his chair and gazing first at one thing, then on at another, as if he wanted to fix in his mind just how everything looked in that little schoolroom. So he said that while working, whenever he looked up, he saw M. Hamel sitting in his chair and looking here and there in the class to have the last look of the class and have a photographic image of the class. Fancy. Imagine. For 40 years he had been there in the same place with his garden outside the window and his class in front of him. It is really difficult. It is really difficult for a person to forget these things forget the place where he had spent his half of the life, and he had to leave forcibly. So he was feeling very bad for the teacher that he had to leave the school and he had to go the next day. Only the desks and benches had worn smooth. The walnut trees in the garden were taller, and the hope vine that he had planted himself twined about the windows to the roof. How it must have broken his heart to leave it all, poor man, to hear his sister moving about in the room above, packing their trunks, for they must leave the country the next day. Observe the notes carefully and try to summarize based on the notes. You will surely enhance your writing skills. Now let's read the next paragraph. But he had the courage, to hear every lesson to the very last. After the writing, we had a lesson in history, and then the babies chanted their ba, bee, bee, bo, boo. Down there at the back of the room, old Hauser had put on his spectacles and, holding his primer in both hands, spelled the letters with them. You could see that he too was crying. His voice trembled with emotion, and it was so funny to hear him that we all wanted to laugh and cry. Ah, how well I remember it, that last lesson. Now, friends, the narrator says that although M. Hamel had heard his sister packing the trunks, he had to leave, but he was very courageous. He heard each and every lesson to the last, and after giving them the lesson in grammar, then he gave them a lesson in writing. After the writing lesson, he gave them a lesson in history, and then the little babies chanted, and then there was a recitation lesson of the alphabets in French. And friends noticed that at the back of the class where the elders were sitting, old Hauser was also chanting, speaking the French alphabets with the little ones. That scene otherwise would have been very funny, to see an old man chanting the alphabets in the class with the little students, and he was also holding his primer in the hand and speaking those alphabets and reciting those alphabets. It was very funny. But at that time, old Hauser was also crying, as he could not read French in future, and same was the condition with everyone in the class. Everyone wanted to both laugh and cry. And Franz said that he remembered the last French lesson very well. There wasn't any doubt he understood each and everything that was taught by M. Hamel that day. Let's look at the notes of the paragraph. Look them carefully. At once the church clock struck 12, then the Angelus. At the same moment, the trumpet of the Persian, returning from the drill, sounded under their windows. M. Hamel stood up, very pale in his chair. I never saw him look so tall. So as they were having the recital of alphabets, French alphabets by the little ones, and at the same time they heard some sounds. They heard the church clock, that the time was now 12 o'clock, and the trumpets of the Persian soldier had also been blown, and it was everybody. M. Hamel stood up at that time listening to these sounds. M. Hamel stood up. He looked very pale, and he looked very pale. My friends, said he, I, but something choked him. He could not go on. Then he returned to the blackboard, took a piece of chalk, and bearing on With all his might, he roared as large as he could, Vive la France! Then he stopped and leaned his head against the wall, and without a word, he made a gesture to us with his hand. School is dismissed. You may go. So now M. Hamel tried to speak something, but he couldn't speak anything. His voice choked. He was filled with emotions and he couldn't say anything. But he took a piece of chalk with whatever strength he was left with and wrote "Vive la France," that means long live France, and he leaned against the wall and he could not say anything further. He just said, he just made the class dismiss. He dismissed the school by the gesture, and it was understood that the children had to go then. Now let's have a look at the notes based on the paragraph we have read just now. See them carefully and try to make summary out of the notes. Remember, repetition leads to perfection. Watch, repeat, and be perfect. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and press the bell icon for the latest videos of my channel.